So we were supposed to do this last week, but because of Solnol and some other things and someone getting sick, we had to delay it to today, Saturday, January 28th. So before we get started, let's introduce everybody. My name is Mike. I'm in Busan, but actually in Seoul right now. Then we have Bori. How are you today, Bori?
I'm doing great. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are watching. Sanggu, also from Busan, but also in Seoul with me this weekend. How are you?
Hello, good morning and good evening.
Yeah, all right. All right, I just got delivered coffee in the office. Thank you to Comrade Dehan. All right, so to get to our topic. So, as we've posted on social media, if you've seen this, you know the stream is about the recent NIS, which is South Korea's security services, and the General Police raiding KCTU, Korean Confederation of Trade Unions offices across the country. So, just a brief overview to catch everyone up on the facts before we start discussing more in depth what happened. So, on Wednesday, January 18th, the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, that's KCTU for short, which is the umbrella organization for the Democratic Trade Union movement, they were raided by the police, and multiple raids were conducted on the offices of KCTU and its affiliates by the National Intelligence Services, that's the NIS that I mentioned, and the National Police Agency. So, for example, the main headquarters in Seoul was raided by hundreds and hundreds of officers. There's some pretty striking imagery that you can see online. We can post the link to where some people in KCT were live streaming the police raid. It was quite intense. Kind of gives you a sense of just the scale and gravity of the state repression going on. So the premise of the raid was they were collecting evidence on 4 people. They were the prime targets. So these include a senior KCTU leader, uh, cadre from the Korean Health and Medical Workers Union, a member of the Korean Metal Workers Union, and the head of the operating committee of the Jeju Seoul Ferry Memoriam. So for folks who may not remember or know, the Seoul was a really tragic um, maritime incident where quite a number of young people lost their lives, and there's been a lot of activism around that. So all these people are current or ex-activists of the KCTU. So it's not entirely clear what the charges are because this is supposed to be evidence collection. That's why they were raiding the office. But some right-wing press has reported that they're possibly being accused of violating the National Security Act, which is this very dubious Cold War era law that's used to repress progressive forces across the board, accusing people of being somehow sympathetic to North Korea, etc. Um, all right, so I guess that lays out some of the basic context there. So, Bori, do you want to go into a little bit more detail? You were actually at the KCTU headquarters when the police raid happened, and then a little bit later, we're going to talk about some of the other raids that happened, specifically targeting Construction Trades Union of KCTU, which that occurred nationally outside of just the Seoul HQ. So, what's your? Can you plug in some of the more of the background, and then also talk a little bit about what it was like being in the building when all this shit happened?
Right, so I I'm having second thoughts on revealing that I was there, but I
Okay.
guess it's fine. I guess it's fine. Um,
His lookalike was there. There's a yeah,
my doppelganger was there, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all about it.
He's so famous. He has a lookalike
But
stand-ins.
yeah, the police were completely surrounding the street in front of the Gyeongyang building, which is where the KCTU headquarters office is located. Uh, if I recall correctly, the offices are on the 10th to 13th floor of the Gyeongyang newspapers building. The street in front of them was surrounded by the police, and they were denying passage for all civilians, for
Mm,
all passerby, and and then they were having a second line of police surround blocking the entrance to the building.
mhm,
There was also a couple of firefighters because there was an air mattress prepared and there was a what do you call it? A ladder prepared as well. And
Mm.
then the police in front of the entrance were barring anyone from entering. You had to show that you had business within the building. You had to show that if you didn't have any identification cards, which the police were asking for, you would have to call someone from inside the building to be let in. Uh, I s- and I guess it's ridiculous because they had a search warrant for a single desk, and it wasn't the entire office, so they were really overstepping and doing that much blocking. uh and then when I got past through those two lines and got to the 13th floor, I got off at the 14th. My doppelganger got off at the 14th, and then he took these stairs down to the 13th floor. There was an extra line of police barring the entrance to the office because there was the elevator. The layout is there's an elevator, there's a stairway, a small hallway to go to the bathroom, and then the entrance to the office. They
Mm.
were barring that. They were completely filling the hallway to the brim, um, and not letting anyone pass through, going from the office to the restroom, and completely making a scene out there. And these were both, there were NIS agents and also police in plain clothing.
Mm.
And it's really funny because these people all of them in plain clothing were claiming that they were doing public service, and that's why, uh, like telling them to back off and let people pass through because you guys only have a search warrant for a single desk. You don't have a search warrant for the entire office. There are no grounds for you to completely block the entrance, block
Mhm.
entry. Um, what are you doing? They were saying that we're doing public service, so back off. And then we people were asking them for their identification because
Mhm.
in the case of the police, that's legally required. If someone asks you for identification, then
Right.
you state your rank and name and say what your business is. One of the officers, apparent officers, didn't prepare that. They didn't have their identification cards with them. So they were sent off. And the KCTU, obviously, they're not going to be letting the police or NIS agents in before they legally recognize that it's required. So there was a standoff before the lawyers arrived,
Mm.
and after the lawyers did arrive and say that this was a legitimate warrant, and the KCTU would be like willing to let them in and let them do their work, the police and the surroundings did not really change afterwards as well. So my doppelganger left around lunchtime because headquarters said that all the people that came in solidarity could leave now because the search warrant being issued was now being taking place. Uh, I don't know what happened after that, but the search went on till like late in the evening. It took a couple, almost 10 hours from, if I recall correctly. Um, and what they did was basically search the desk, took a couple of files, searched the computer, copied a couple of files onto USB, and that was it. So all that commotion for a meager amount of data.
Right. Yeah. I mean, seems. Let me share that again. I was showing some pictures of what you were talking about here, just to give people a sense of the scale of, like, as you said, like they were trying to search one desk. It was not targeted at the organization itself. Well, in a way it was, but the evidence collection court order was not. But yeah, you can see here.
Wow,
Uh,
there were two air mattresses. Okay.
yeah, so you can see just the sheer scale of how many police were sent and NIA agents were sent. I mean, to me, I mean, I think to any anyone, this is clearly, in addition to the evidence collection, it was a clear attempt at intimidation of KCTU. They really wanted to send a message. Yeah, these are, yes, these giant suicide mats. So yeah, pretty shocking stuff here. All right, so Songo, did you want to add anything to that? Just sort of the general
Um,
context of what happened.
I saw a Facebook post about um, NIS raid, and it was posted by uh, it was posted by the Korean Health and Medical Workers Union,
Hmm.
and the NIS guys like bring like really big boxes, really two box, and like what they did was like taking like really few documents, and
Right. I saw that picture as
yeah,
well. So the
only like
boxes we're talking about, you usually see when like you go on the news, search warrants. They have these specific. I think it's blue,
yeah,
hu- humongous
huge box,
boxes.
yeah,
Yeah, they brought two, and they weren't able to fill the bottom of one. Like
yeah,
the picture showed that the documents were so scarce that they weren't even able to fill in the blank spaces on one box.
Well, yeah, it seemed like it was like a fishing expedition, as they say, like to just intimidate KCTU. Um, well, before we get into more detail, just a little bit more context for people maybe who haven't followed this inside Korea or like just people outside of Korea. So the current president of South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol, is really putting all of his capital into like major neoliberal reforms, and KCTU, as sort of the vanguard of the trade union movement, is very much in the way of that. We had a trucker strike a few months ago. We did a previous live stream on that. Some people have said that just sort of the severity of the police repression, state repression happening right now is in some ways kind of petty revenge on KCTU for having the gall to resist his various neoliberal reforms. So that's sort of a little bit of the background for why this is so aggressive. All right, well, let's,
Well, a bit more on that is that
yeah.
there has been changes in administrations from liberals to conservatives, and the KCTU was always under attack. All of KCTU's leaders have been arrested at least once under all administrations.
Mm,
And we'll be talking about the construction workers in a bit, and the tax and the logic being applied there started under the Roh administration, the second liberal administration of South Korea.
mhm,
Uh, I think the biggest thing that was alarming about this was that the NIS was operating in broad daylight. Uh, the NIS, under the previous liberal Moon administration, was undergoing reform, and Moon had one of his guys from the Democratic Party to on as the NIS head, and they revealed a lot of internal documents because the NIS was always very shady, secretive, and
mhm.
their slogan is literally heading towards the light from the shadows, something like that. I don't have a really good translation ready, but um, in a rough way, that's what it is. They tried to change it during the Moon administration to something that is less shady because
Yeah, something
the
less
reform
sinister.
would be the reform would be not letting the NIS off the hook when they start like monitoring and surveilling civilians, etc. Actually do some proper spy work, if
Mm,
that's what like proper statecraft, whatever. Um, they changed that back to the initial one on when once the president change was switched back to a conservative one. Now,
mm.
that's their slogan, operating from the shadows, but here they are
At least
invested
it's
as the
honest. Yeah,
National Intelligence Service
yeah.
in broad daylight. They're in these black vests and walking around the office, and that's one of the big sh- like it's one of the tells why this was a big show. They don't really have a good lead on this, and why this was just bullshit charges,
Mm,
like strong indication of that. So the NIS, well, obviously this is the first time the NIS themselves identifying as themselves were raiding the KCTU headquarters. Prior attempts were done by the police. So that's a big difference. But there is a long tradition of smearing progressive forces as North Korean collaborators, spy rings in South Korea. It was always being brought up whenever it was politically useful for the state to have one of those incidents happen. And a lot of them have been revealed, have been now recognized as being conjured by torture, blackmailing, fabricating of evidence. And this isn't like talking under military dictatorships. This happened way into the 2000s. We're talking about 2013 when the NIS was revealed to frame the North Korean born Chinese national Yoon Song and tried to frame him as a North Korean spy. And they used blackmail, they fabricated evidence, whatever. But the thing is that all those spy rings were announced after arrests were made,
Mm.
not before. This wasn't an arrest that happened. This was a search warrant.
Mm.
So, like, try to just approach it from a common sense perspective. If you're trying to clamp down on a spy ring, you don't want to let them know that you're after them, because spy rings usually operate on a very uh, dot to dot basis, and if one of them gets caught, the others lie low. So and then they would try to like get rid of all their evidence of activities, etc. So the NIS is not being very serious here. Like,
Mhm.
why would you be announcing to the entire country that you're after them if that was actually the case? So that's why it seems pretty obvious that this isn't a serious issue, and it's also a search warrant. There wasn't. It's not an actual an arrest or something serious. And that brings us to the whole fiasco, the spectacle uh, of the raid. So there were 700 police surrounding the building, the street, in front of the office. Some people counted it as over 1,000. I don't know the exact numbers, but we're talking about a lot of people. uh, and then the firefighters deployed an air mattress and a ladder. A ladder would, I guess, to be able to. The idea would be to be able to get into the 13th floor through the windows if the need arises. And the air mattress is to prevent, like, if the police are after a suspect and they try to get out of the window, they want them alive. That's where the air mattress plays a role. But both of these things are irrelevant if this is just a search warrant. Like, if this is not an arrest, if the
Mhm.
police are not trying to physically retain a person, both of those things are not needed. And then, uh, yeah. So all of that is to make a scene as if the entirety of the KCTU was under trouble. That was not the
Mm.
case. Now, I bring up the number of, and then the last thing would be that the conservative newspapers were reporting it as if the entirety of the KC2 was caught violating the national security law.
Mm.
Uh, but as I mentioned earlier, the police were blocking everyone from entering the building, from entering the entrance, going past the street, entering the office, etc. But they had carefully crafted the entry so that a 조선일보
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about this.
reporter,
This is
yeah,
crazy.
the
Yeah.
조선일보 reporter was be like, what
Embedded
is that?
journalist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
embedded journalist, exactly.
So for
They're
people who don't know,
entering a
Chosun
battle scene.
Ilbo, Chosun Ilbo is like, I don't know, for a Western audience, maybe the equivalent is like a Rupert Murdoch owned like British tabloid newspaper. It's just
Exactly.
outrageous, kind of like frothing at the mouth, like Moon Jae-in's a communist, everybody's a communist, everybody's a North Korean agent. So yeah,
Uh,
the police came in with an embedded, well, not quite as salacious as maybe British tabloids, but
Exactly. So
um,
it's a conservative newspaper that tries to it's like the mouthpiece of the bourgeois in South Korea.
right,
So
right.
they it's worthwhile paying attention to what Joseon writes, because they are the best at the craft in creating frameworks.
Right.
If they want to lead public opinion in one way, uh, they they pull off stunts, and it's important to note that a Joseon reporter was embedded in the police. So
Absolutely.
when they got caught, when the reporter got caught, they got shoved out of the office and sent away because that's the KCTU atmosphere. Joseon reporters and the other conservative newspapers, they are denied interviews, they are denied entry into the offices. No
Mm.
one will, everyone refuses to work with them. And this is much more infuriating when everyone else, actual people working in the office, were barred from entering, while and then a reporter was allowed in.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah.
that the I guess the icing on the top was that the raid started at 9:10, and 조선일보 put out a brief report at 9:16 that the raid was happening. And
Mm.
you can't
Okay.
write a report like that in 6 minutes. You have to write it in advance, and that indicates that uh, um, they knew of the raid in advance. So
Okay.
it was a deep collaboration that was pulling off a big show right in front, right before holiday season starts, so that everyone might like a lot of public opinion, people meeting with their families would talk about the KC2 and the
Mm.
national security law charges against them. So I guess that was the picture that they had convised.
That's a good point. Yeah, right before Seoul, which the Korean New Year holiday. So the something to talk about around the holiday dinner table. All right, we have a quick question though from somebody. If I can put that up on the screen. So this is from Songmin Park. With what Bori is saying, do you all think Yoon's approach toward labor represents more of a continuation or a notable break from recent past presidents?
So
Maybe
so
Bori then Songu, you can give your thoughts about that.
sure, Sangu, you want to give it a go?
In my opinion, uh, I would say like there is like little continuation because like also when Moon was in the chairs, he arrested the president of KCTU. Uh, he didn't raid it, but like anti-KCTU was also in Moon administration, so I should say like there is a continuation.
Right. So the current president of the KCT, Yang Kyung-soo, was arrested during the Moon administration, um, and he's still the current president. Now, it's there's anti-KCT, anti-labor is continuous whether the administrations are liberal or conservative, but the conservatives tried to make that more explicit, while as the liberal administrations try to do that kind of under the scenes. They don't try to make that much of a commotion. They want to be seen as being pro-labor while pulling off anti-labor schemes. So the big labor reforms that really deteriorated working conditions all passed during the liberal administrations, and then the really insidious, like the presidential order for get back to work order that Yoon pulled off for the truckers strike, that was devised under the Rule administration, the second liberal government. So these anti-labor, there are literal continuations in that case. Now, would the NIS raid have happened under the Moon administration? No, because the Moon administration was brought in explicitly because the NIS was doing a lot of dirty work for the conservative governance, and there's a sort of a an antagonism there. The NIS, I don't think NIS agents would identify as liberals. They would not like the liberal
Yeah,
governance.
yeah, yeah.
Some of them might actually think that Moon Jae-in was a dirty North Korean communist. The more sensible and smart ones would not do that. They would retain some distance. But yeah, the NIS being reformed under the Moon administration would make it fairly hard for the NIS to pull this off during then. That said, the Moon administration also did not get rid of the NIS and tried to let them continue some of their activities. So this is coming back to bite them in the ass and the KCTU's ass as well.
All right, very good. Yeah, thank you for that question, Songmin. Very good question. All right, well, let's I think we've gone through sort of like at least most of the salient details of what happened with the raid. And yeah, that thing about the embedded Chosun Ilbo reporter, that's wow. I guess nothing should surprise me at this point though. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the political context and more of the motivations around this. So Yoon, the president of South Korea, he has been very unpopular during his entire tenure so far. So he was elected on a very narrow margin, and his popularity ratings began cratering shortly after he took office. Making Joe Biden look popular in the U.S. almost. We're talking in the 20% range, which is pretty astounding. This is like within 2 to 3 months of him being in office, it was getting into this kind of territory, 30%, 25%. And as always, with a lot of politicians, good way to detract from your own administration scandals is to stir up a boogeyman and start, if not a war, maybe a class war skirmish. So we mentioned the truckers' strike, which we did a stream on a while back, which happened in November and December. After Yoon took a very aggressive kind of law and order stance on the strike, he did get a 10% rise of approval. And some of the people surveyed in the public did reference his handling of the strike as being one reason why they increased their approval of his administration. So basically, this mobilized the support of the right wing with anti-union sentiments, and basically got some. I think probably most of these people were people who had voted for him but got disillusioned. Maybe brought back some of his hardcore base. I don't know. We'll see what Bori thinks about that.
Yeah,
So
so
what's Yoon's like calculation here?
so
You think?
Yoon was only able to win the presidential election on a very small margin, and the strategy he seems to be going for while imposing a back to Lee Myung-bak era neoliberal policies in a very explicit manner. Some of the reports that the government puts out are word to word the same from the Lee Myung-bak era. Like doing that, he seems to go for the strategy of trying to maintain the hardcore right support rather than try to win off the centrists that are more disillusioned on politics overall. There's a huge portion of people who don't identify as supporters of either party, whether that be the Minju Party or the uh, the People's Power Party, which sounds very radical, and their color is red, but don't be fooled. It's
Well,
the
yeah,
conservative party.
yeah. I can't
But
keep up with their names. They change their name every few years.
yeah,
They have a
exactly.
scandal. Yeah,
The Justice
the
Party,
rebrand.
funny fact is that the Justice Party is the longest party in Korean history to uh, retain their name. Like all the other parties, like change their name every 5 years or so.
So
Um,
anybody, if you ever have a scandal, just change your name and everyone will forget about
but
it.
yeah, so instead of winning over like the centrist, that neutral ground, they're just trying to garner support, rally the right, and really useful way of that is to stamp up anti-union sentiment. And the thing is that the anti-union sentiment is not something that is amongst the right. The liberals share it as well,
Mm,
and liberals would not like Yoon, but say the KCTU had it coming or something like that, or they're not like principally standing up against this repression and stuff like that.
mm,
So yeah, that I guess that would explain it. Trucker strike, very law and order, putting down the strike. Like the government literally promised that they would uh, continue and expand the safe wages system, um, and then they didn't follow up on that for the entirety of the ha- latter part of the year. And then when the truckers went on strike, they just clamped down on it. So that would all be reasons to stroke up hatred. And then they actually found that this strategy works to an extent, 10% rise in support. So we'll see a long continuation of that this year as well.
Well, and I guess one factor in this too maybe is the legislative elections are not too far away. Um, do you think that's in Moon's calculation as well?
In June, right? That's the general election is next year,
It's
so
pretty early next year, though, right? Yeah.
it's still a bit far off. I would
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that the bigger calculation that they would be considering would be the 1 year anniversary of the Yoon administration, which is coming up in May.
He wants to have something to show for it.
So yeah, this
Okay.
is something that I heard that I found was uh quite enlightening. Is that Koreans in general, the general public, want to see the 4 seasons pass before they start holding strong opinions about the president. So that 1 year anniversary is going to be when people start digging their heels into
Hmm.
whatever opinions they have of the president. So that is going to be the tipping point on whether the Yoon administration will continue be seen as an unpopular yet still in charge president, or massively unpopular to the extent that it's finding themselves harder and harder to pull off government whatever.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, this is. Yeah, I think a lot of people are like that. Sort of, especially kind of like moderate voters who don't identify with any particular party. It's like, we'll give him a year, then we'll form a solid opinion. All right, Songgu, what do you think? Any thoughts about sort of the general context or what Yoon's motivations and uh, what what the thought was behind this like huge as Boris said spectacle with the very excessive police raid.
Um, I agree with Bird's idea, and I also think that like it is like trying to change the atmosphere. Like everybody is like blaming the Yoon, and like to change people's eye to make people's eye look at the case to look at the KCTU, like look at them their Korean ties, like things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's also just been like some kind of comical like scandals just within his administration too, which I think that's part of it is well distracting from that. It seems like almost every week there's some sort of ridiculous personnel scandal in his administration. So,
Yes.
I mean, there's a leadership election for People Power Party, and the leading candidate, her name is what was it, Nam or
Nah, not
yeah,
that
yeah,
one.
Nam. Sorry.
Nagyongwon.
Yeah, well, she like sort of contradicted the president or the administration's policy on child care policy because South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world, and successive governments have tried to, without success, try to figure out ways to like partially reverse that. She kind of mildly contradicted him, and then he just like fired her from every position, and then just went after her within the uh, party leadership election, which I guess traditionally the sitting president tries to stay out of the party leadership race, at least like publicly. And then his wife has been embroiled in sort of outrageous plagiarism scandals with her academic career. So yeah, it does seem like he's desperately trying to do anything he can to like turn the news headlines away from his own shortcomings. All right, well we're gonna get back to some of the context when we go into the police construction trade workers. Yeah, I guess for now we've talked about the National Intelligence Services, or
I just want to add that like
yeah,
the question still is there. Why was the NIS operating in broad daylight? Why were they making this huge show and bringing it onto themselves? Why are they like going into the spotlight? The reason I briefly mentioned it before is that the NIS was reformed under the Munis administration. They weren't abolished, sadly, but they were supposed to hand over their investigation authority upon supposed violations on the national security law over to the police, and that starts next year. And this is the final year they have
mm,
in continuing with those activities. And national security law, because it's a like you can it comes from on during Japanese under Japanese colonial rule when they were targeting communists, socialists, nationalists from abrupting the rule, and then it was brought back in just before the Korean War to clamp down on the uprisings happening in the South, and it was actually introduced before the South Korean government's constitution was written. But anyhow, uh, it's it it's really ridiculous because it expands so much and it gives a lot of jurisdiction to the police and the NIS, and it also is overlaps with other existing laws, so it doesn't have any justification for it to exist. That said, uh, because it's so expansive, the NIS has used it to really get liberal with what they're allowed to do and not. So that's why they're really insistent on retaining those powers. And they pulled off this show, that's how I interpret it, to
Hmm.
show that they still have a role to play. The evidence fabrication for the incidents in 2013, that was also the case of the NIS trying to prove to authorities in the administration that they had a role to play. Um,
Hmm.
Now, what's dangerous about this is that not only did the NIS pull this off, but you might see the prosecutors doing the same, the police doing the same, and there being a kind of positive feedback amongst those three bodies in trying to prove that the national security law is still important. We still have a lot of North Korean spies in South Korea, etc., etc. Um, but yeah, that's the political logic that the NI seems to be following and explains the reasons, the motives for the entire show.
Yeah, no, that certainly seems like it. Sango, anything you want to add before we kind of try to do a little bit of brief history of NIS, just to give listeners an idea of that this police raid didn't come out of nowhere. This is decades of state violence, in large part perpetrated by the NIS.
Hmm. No, I think I don't have anything to add.
All right, that's
Right.
okay.
Yeah. So I'll go along with that. So the head of the NIS, Won-seun, Nam Jae-jun, Lee Byung-gi, Lee Byung-hoo, like all of them were arrested on charges that they were overstepping the boundaries of what the NIS was allowed to do. What they did was surveil civilians, intervene in domestic politics, try to sway public opinion through operating uh, comment teams. Like there will be teams of NIS agents, like not the cool shit you see on James Bond films. You would
Hmm.
have NIS agents sit together in computer rooms and write comments that would smear
Hey kids,
progressives
North
as
Korea seems pretty cool,
North
right?
Korean
Like on Naver.
spies, collaborators, and just
Hmm.
simp for the conservative government, etc. uh, they would also fabricate evidence,
I'm just picturing
and
like a 45-year-old like security agent sitting in a PC bong or
I
surrounded
would
by a
think it
bunch of
would be hell
teenagers.
of depressing. Like, I would imagine NIS agents, they would somewhat like dig into the nationalist mythology of, and the NIS mythology of being cool agents that actually contributes something to the country, and they're given jobs that is just writing comments all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, because uh, President Park Geun-hye was ousted on abusing her authority as well. Part of that was shown to have happened under the NIS. That's why Lee Myung-bak was arrested and served jail time. The NIS heads served jail time as well, and that's why the NIS was getting reformed. But Yoon Suk-yeol has released Lee Myung-bak, has released
Hmm.
previous NIS heads. Uh, and they are also trying to reintroduce. So the NIS is a separate institution. A similar intelligence unit exists in the military, and that was what was primarily used under the military dictatorships. Park Chung-hee had the KCIA, Korean Central Intelligence Agency, so literally Korean CIA, which had CIA support and education. And the next dictator, Chun Doo-hwan, was also an important figure within the KCIA, and but because that was the head had assassinated Park Chung-hee, that agency was uh, changed to, I forgot the acronym, the
Well, it's
National
just like the
Security
political.
Planning Agency. So the
Yeah, it's
head
just
of the
like the political
KC.
parties. They change their name every time there's a huge
Right,
issue, like
exactly. So
assassinating a
Chun
president.
Doo-hwan was the acting director of the KCIA, and because the head of the KCIA, Kim Jae-gyu assassinated Park, he changed it to the NSPA, National Security Planning Agency. And um, the national security headquarters within uh, the security headquarters within the military was changed into the current Korean military. I don't know how to translate this. Kimu Sarangbu. But what I was trying to say is that the Yoon Suk-yeol and the 국민의힘 is the People's Power Party is trying to change the law so that the uh, jurisdiction of the Kimusa령부 expands, and they will be able to play the role that the NIS had traditionally, the KCIA, the NSPA had traditionally played. They are also trying to uh, argue that the NIS's jurisdiction of investigating possible National Security Act violations should not be handed over to the police. They've also put in they tried to uh, they've installed the national, I don't know what it stands for, the NCCC at the Pangyo Techno Valley, about possible corporate industrial spying, like monitoring that. That's the rationale behind it, but because it's dealing with domestic affairs, that leads to the possibility of the NIS expanding that center to surveilling civilians as well. So there you see this kind of return to that kind of national security days.
Hmm.
And when we talk about the human rights abuses of the NIS, because we're not just talking about the NIS, we're talking about its predecessors, the KCIA and the MPSA. We're talking about dozens of incidents where they fabricated evidence, tortured, tortured people, surveilled people illegally, etc., and all of them being revealed and recognized by the state, by the courts, as being illegal, as being wronged, and these court decisions are not like they did not happen 10 years prior. Like these court decisions are coming out in 2021. These are very fairly recent happenings. So this isn't a thing of the past, although the fabrications happened 10 years prior. These things are concurrent to what we're seeing right now.
Hmm. All right.
So,
Interesting. Yeah. There's a. I just looked at the. It looks like the kind of official English translation of their slogan is "We work in the dark to serve the light."
there you have it.
Uh,
And they were working in the dark with the black vests that said the NIS,
yeah.
walking around in broad daylight in the KCTU office. That's how they do their shit.
Well, they need a break from typing neighbor comments in PC Bang.
Exactly.
It's not healthy to be in those all day. Got to get some sunlight. All right. All right, Sangu, any thoughts about like just sort of the NIS's legacy and how it informs the current events with KCTU?
I remember that there was a woman agent who was cut when she was writing a comment, and like I remember there was like Justice Party congressman and other guys who were trying to catch her writing a comment, and she locked herself in a room, and refused to came out. And like I remember like conservatives claiming that like um, the
This
guys
was
who
infringing upon personal space.
yeah
Oh, so
and
now
like
they're feminists. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah
exactly. Yeah, but that
they
was
tried to lock
hilarious.
her up.
That
Yeah.
was hilarious. She was caught in the middle of writing comments. Uh, People tried to raid her office. She was working from home, I think, and she
Yeah,
locked
I think
herself
so.
in, and there was a whole debacle over that. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, okay. I think I heard about this. It was like some YouTube streamers were like outside of her house, right?
Yeah,
I
as
think.
streamers and congressmen.
Yeah, yeah. So they were like live streaming it, and then yes, one of the conservatives. It was like because usually they engage in this like very cynical, vicious, anti-feminist rhetoric, and they were like, "I can't believe that they like violated this woman's personal space." God,
Exactly.
so opportunistic and cynical.
But I would imagine that person being very suicidal. Like it's already depressing to be writing comments, but getting caught in the midst of it and getting on
Yeah,
national news, I would be locking myself up and
yeah,
not
yeah.
seeing the light of day ever again.
Yeah, no, it's like someone gets a job at the CIA thinking they're going to be like a Jason Bourne or something, and then they're just like making coffee for Mike Pompeo. It's going to be a bit of a letdown. Um, all right, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much history there. If people are more interested in that, who may not know about it, I'm sure if you message us on any of our social media, we're happy to send you some more additional readings about the just sort of history of state violence, particularly through the security services. All right. Well, I guess maybe now's a good time to turn our attention to. So we've talked about Yoon and his desire to deepen neoliberal reforms and do these very flashy theatrical uh, spectacles using 700 police officers to get a thin file of documents. Um, so I think we've kind of painted a decent picture of what the state of the kind of uh, South Korean right wing is doing. But let's talk a little bit more maybe about liberal administrations. If you guys, we talked about it a little bit, but if you guys wanted to add any more about maybe what the previous Moon Jae-in, Minju-dong, which is the center-left party or centrist party, depending on how you view it, what they have done in terms of labor, because the way it's portrayed in like the English-speaking media is that Moon is just sort of this kind of, good-hearted, like Jimmy Carter liberal, pro-union, pro-democracy, pro-women, all the pros, and that's contrasted heavily with like the South Korean right wing. But as you guys have indicated, there's actually quite a bit of overlap especially in terms of neoliberal policy and how they relate to the labor movement. It's just the rhetoric obviously is very different often. But I don't know. Any further thoughts about how the liberals in South Korea have approached this issue with the trade union movement and also KCTU in particular? Or did we kind of cover most of that?
Yeah, I think we covered most of that, and we can move on to the Construction Workers Union.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so Sangu's going to lead us off for this one, but just a little bit of context. So we just went through the NIS and National Police Agency raid on the national headquarters of Korean Confederation of Trade Unions in Seoul. But this was for evidence collection on 4 individuals who it's not clear what exactly they're being accused of, some sort of violation of the National Security Act. But along with this were raids all over the country targeting the Construction Workers Union, which is affiliated with the KCTU. So
Small
we're gonna.
correction there. They also raided the FKTU, the Federation of Korean Trade Unions offices as well.
Okay, all right, yeah. Just a quick thing, and then Songa is going to tell us more about this. But so KCTU is the more left, more recent more kind of, I don't know, we tend to view them as like the democratic uh, tendency of the trade union movement. FKTU is a much older trade union federation. Under the military dictatorship period, it had sort of semi-state approval. For
No,
example,
it was explicitly built by the state. So
yeah, I
it's a
shouldn't
yellow
say
union
semi.
state
Yeah, I mean,
through
a
and
lot of
through.
right-wing military
Like
governments even.
you go into the homepage, and they have their own history.
Mhm,
And Park Chung-hee introduced a lot of national security acts, like, and
mhm.
changed the constitution. They have it in their history that they voted in approval.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
a
it's
proud legacy that they have.
yeah, yeah. No, my wife was a member, as I've told you, and like, yeah, they suck. Like to be they don't fight for their workers or get good contracts. But yeah, so a lot of these right-wing military governments, historically, even fascist governments, have had official trade union organizations that serve to discipline the workforce and mobilize the workforce rather than be any sort of vehicle for workers' voice. But yeah, the government even rated FKTU. So even their like deference to the state didn't save them
But
from a police raid.
it's like giving off the veneer of fairness. That's what the
That's a good
FKTU
point.
rates
Yeah.
were.
So
The
it's like, oh, we're
primary
not
targets
targeting
were the
KCTU.
KCTU affiliated construction workers.
All right, that's a very good point. So kind of obscures that fact if you kind of do a token rate on everyone else. All right. Well, this is a separate issue from the National Security Act. An evidence collection thing that affected the KCTU headquarters in Seoul. So I guess, Sunggu, can you start us off here? So what are the accusations behind these raids, regional raids all across the country on the construction workers affiliated unions?
Separate round race, the construction workers union is based on an allegation of union corruption. About 20 Burma and current labor union officials are charged with coercion and intimidation for bursting the companies to hire their union members. The construction companies have been complaining about this practice. A survey by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport that only included the opinions of construction companies became the basis of the police investigation. I will explain it more on the back, but like um, union asking the companies to hire their union members. It is related to the like their working conditions.
Hmm.
Um, because like construction workers working condition is like very different from like ordinary workers, so this is happening. And also, according to the police, another reason for the raid was because the union tried to force construction companies to pay for the union officials and ask for the bribe. Um, I'll explain it later.
Yeah,
Okay. So yeah.
the
I'll go.
employment thing, I understand it as closed shop. That's how the
Yeah,
construction industry works. Mike, could you explain what the difference between closed shop and open shop is?
Yeah, so I was going to ask about that. So it sounds like the government is accusing them of using like intimidation and bribery to get their members hired. But yeah, a closed shop is when you have an agreement with an employer, and in order for someone to be hired, they have to join the union. Or especially in the construction trades, they have agreements where a certain firm can only use union labor. So, for
Dock workers
example,
traditionally have that agreement.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
And in the case of South Korea, the state literally made that the case. It was the state that made the dock workers a closed shop.
hmm. So yeah, closed shop, you have to be
So
conditionally
it's not
employed.
something out of the ordinary. The state themselves created a closed shop in the dock workers. The
Hmm.
construction workers are doing that on their own initiative, but
Hmm.
it's not like completely like unimaginable.
Right. Yeah, this is not unusual. I mean, it's very common, or at least, well, it's becoming less common just because of the destruction of the labor movement, but it's fairly common in the United States as well. But also, a lot of, I think what you're trying to say, Sung, is or what you were saying, the construction, a lot of these construction workers are, I guess, what we would call independent contractors. So they're somewhat self-employed. And then I guess this leads us into the union's counter argument. So they're saying the state is accusing them of coercion, intimidation, etc. What is have been the various responses from the unions that have been targeted?
I was able to find the KCTU Construction Union members' clarification about the raid and the statement of police in the Gyeongshimun article. According to the construction union member, when there is a construction site, union asks the company to hire their members and discuss the ways and working conditions. But what the government and police are doing is making the discussion illegal even if there is a mutual consent between union and company. Like if there is a mutual consent about the um, closed shop between the company and the union, uh, though there can be a mutual consent, but like what government and police are doing is like bring all of them as illegal things. And
Mm.
what I heard is because like it is illegal to only hire the union members uh, to uh, to write in the document that they will only hire union members. They usually say like we will do the companies usually say we will do our best to hire union members.
Mm.
That's what I heard.
Mm. Another thing is that all despite all the talk of freedom from Yoon Suk-yeol, like even if so they were talking about uh reprimanding companies that collaborated with unions. So they're
Mm.
infringing upon the capital's right to negotiate with unions.
Right. I mean, yeah, this stuff is always like very hypocritical. But yeah, I mean, another reason too is I'm not sure how it works in South Korea, but I would imagine it's quite similar. Like, if you want to get like some sort of skilled construction trade, like union apprenticeship thing, it's a very intense process. So, I mean, the reason a lot of companies voluntarily work with union workers is in the construction trades is because they tend to be the most high skilled and best workers. So that's one thing too. Why some construction? Just a side note, why some of
That's
these
true in
things.
South Korea as well. So
Yeah, I would
it's
imagine.
it's
Yeah.
it's not the companies that like provide educational services. It's the trade unions.
Yeah.
The KCT affiliated construction workers union is is who they are the one providing educational services for members so that they can acquire the skills required to work in the construction industry. None of
Yeah.
the companies are pulling out their resources for that.
Right. Okay. All right. So that, yeah, it seems so. They're saying the construction workers are asking for bribes, but it sounds like they're kind of mischaracterizing asks for wage increases as a bribe. So it's like, hey, can we get a little more money for the work we're doing? And then that's like considered some sort of extortion. I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that, Sanggu?
The reason turbine engineers ask for extra money is due to the fact that construction companies want turbine engineers to do extra work that they can do with the turbine instead of using other heavy equipment engineers. So union is insisting companies hire more heavy equipment engineers rather than making turbine engineers to do extra work. And also union is trying to prevent turbine engineers getting extra money.
So yeah, so all the bribe accusations that the conservative newspapers and liberal commentators are throwing around is, if you look into the numbers, they all come from the tower crane operators receiving extra money, and this is outside of the wages they're getting paid. But the reason because of that is because they're being forced into working extra hours. The uh, because the construction work is always subcontracted. Uh, the main construction company like Hyundai or GS or like these companies will only give out the money to employ and to hire a single tower crane and a single engineer. And then the construction companies that work underneath them would be forced into a situation where they have to ask the tower crane operator to work extra time, and also instead of using other heavy equipment as Sangu just mentioned, they would use the tower crane for that. And because the tower crane operator is working overtime, and like they have to go up the ladder to the top of the tower crane, and if the tower crane falls over, that's instant death. So
Mm,
these are very precarious working conditions, and that's why there's a long tradition of tower crane operators receiving like side notes, extra money, bribes, so from workers and companies part, so that they will continue to do the work. Uh, but the funny thing is that the KCTU has been clamping down on this practice and disciplining union members if they do receive extra money. But that's conveniently left out of the picture, and it's being shown as if the KC2 affiliated union members are corrupt and receiving bribes,
mm.
completely outside of what they're supposed to get paid.
All right. Well, that's really good context to know. And another thing, I guess, you alluded to this earlier is so these raids were against KCTU, FKTU, and then also a number of various like sort of smaller construction trades union to, the real target is KCTU, but by raiding them all simultaneously it creates the illusion that it really is like an honest effort by the state to crack down on so-called corruption in the labor movement as a whole. Um, so I guess what is the motivation here to attack the construction trades unions in particular? Because they could have gone after any of the various unions under KCTU's leadership or any sector of the labor movement generally. Why construction trades? Why is that a target for Yoon? Sangu, what do you think?
In my opinion, suppression against the construction union is happening because of the massive growth and the power of the construction union. For example, between 2020 and 2021, construction union heavy equipment sector's membership growth was over 15%. If we only look at the growth of Busan and Gao's heavy equipment sector's membership growth, it was over 30%. I can build this because I live in Busan.
Mhm.
Sometimes I go to Big Lally in Busan, and like almost like half of the almost half of the workers were participating in the rally is construction workers. So
Okay.
I can feel the atmosphere. And also the union is being suppressed because they're very militant. Like for example, during the trucker strike, um, unions in the same industry union with the trucker was not able to conduct the solidarity strike, but the construction union was able to get on the solidarity strike. Moreover, when the prosecution was asking the court for an arrest warrant to arrest the Busan Construction Union official, one of the reasons they allowed was to reduce the union's influence, which is getting bigger. It was kind of funny.
So yeah, the construction, if like they do any sort of strike action or work action, it can be incredibly disruptive to the economy, and then also their militancy with being engaged in the trucker strike and etc. All right, that makes sense. Yeah, they're targeting the strongest parts of the labor movement. All right, any thoughts about that, Bori?
Right. Yeah. So I guess a little further context was
Mhm.
a big portion of what the truckers uh what's the word, send around is concrete, which is
Mhm.
used into construction sites. So there's a very direct relationship on what the truckers were doing and the work that the uh, construction workers were doing. And the union put out a statement in solidarity saying that even if the truckers don't work now, the concrete is coming to the site sooner or later. So
Mhm.
they're not like they're not pushing us out of the job. We can wait. That's why we're in solidarity. You should not uh, like pit the government should stop pitting workers against workers. Construction workers stand in solidarity, and that
Mm.
was quite badass. And
Yeah,
that
because it
was
seems like it'd be easy to drive a wedge between the two of them, but they resisted that. Yeah.
another commonality between the truckers and the construction workers again is the self-employed contracted workers element. So legally, both truckers and construction workers, especially the heavy equipment operators, are not recognized as workers. They're designated as uh, specially employed workers,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes them exempt from the usual labor laws. Uh, so the extent is that the truckers union is not recognized by the union. That's why they're affiliated with the KPTU as Truckers Solidarity Headquarters, whereas the construction workers union is actually recognized by the Ministry of Labor. They issued out a certificate for recognizing that this is an actual union.
Mm.
Uh, but the Yoon Suk-yeol administration has been uh, trying to use the Fair Trade Act, like which was uh brought in to stop monopolies from happening on the higher echelons of capital, and they're trying to apply it to the unions because they are trying to frame those unions as uh employer groups that are trying to impose monopolies.
Mm.
Uh, so that has been used against the truckers. That is being used against the construction workers as well. So if this, I don't think the legal case will actually work out because every single country in the world makes the Fair Trade Act and makes unions exempt from it because workers, like, they're in completely different conditions from those that employ people.
Mm-hmm.
But they're framing it as if it will work, and conservative newspapers will probably not pay attention when the actual court rulings come out. So another attack on the unions and some extra context.
All right. Well, here's a quick segue into a question we just got. This is from Sung Hong. He or she asks, or they ask, could you give an overview and your opinion on how unions and the labor movement generally are responding to these attacks from Yoon Suk Yeol? So whoever wants to take that first, Bori or Sungwoo. So I guess the question is about what are the unions thinking is the strategy to resist these attacks? Maybe
Hmm.
Songgo, you want to give your thoughts first, and then we'll go to Bori.
Um, I heard like Union is preparing for the general strike, but I'm not sure about the impact because because KCTU was like um, every year trying to make a general strike, but not very successful. So like I think like this time like union officials and like KCTU headquarters is putting more effort to make a real general strike, but I'm not sure about the effect. And and uh, I'm not sure about like other response. At um,
It's it,
case
right. It could continue. Sorry.
yeah case T like leftist parties like Justice Party, Progress Party, Labor Party, Green Party is collaborating when like does something to like attack the workers and unions, but like I think it's not that very effective.
Okay, Bori, what do you think?
Well, the unions are put off on the back foot here because the truckers' strike was effectively put down by the state. Uh, so a lot of it is being held as reactions to the state's offensive, but usually that has always been the case. Uh, the KCTU has brought in the leaders of all the uh, trade union units together and brought them together to discuss the possibility of holding off a general strike in July. And you'll be seeing, I guess we'll be seeing what how like a certain build up to that point. The KCTU will also be changing their operating system, I guess. Not the computers, but like their organizational wise
Mm,
to a struggle headquarters, and that would be bringing and working in solidarity, working with other civil society organizations, and trying to create an anti-Yun uh, a front. So
mm,
the the Yun administration last year in 2022 was just being launched. They were trying to settle down, devise strategies for employing the policies that they want. They did that successfully with the truckers, but they will want to continue to solidify their position and continue on the work that they started. So we'll be seeing a ramp up in suppression this year, and we'll be seeing larger resistance from the trade unions from that. Whether that will be successful or not is something that we will have to see, but we are in for a dynamic year, and we don't know how the conjuncture will change because I didn't mention it earlier today, but we also have the Itaewon disaster. Uh,
mm,
the hundredth day anniversary commemoration is being will be held next week on Saturday. Uh,
mm.
and we will be seeing continuous rallies on that throughout the year and afterwards as well. And we all know that the Seoul ferry disaster was what ultimately, and the energy behind that was what brought down Park Geun-hye. So we might be seeing something similar with Yoon Suk. We don't know. And also last year, when we saw a strike being pulled off by the subcontracted workers, the irregular workers in the uh, 거제도 통영 what's the 고통고지
고성.
고성 in the Daewoo Joseon industry, the shipbuilding industry. That wasn't something that the KCTU prepared in advance. That was a trade union pulling that off, and then the entire labor movement coming in to support them. So we will be seeing stuff like that happening because uh, deteriorating labor conditions is universal across. The Yoon administration is trying to reform labor law that would allow workers to work extra hours, uh, and these are hours that will be murderous for people doing manual work. So
Mhm.
we will be seeing people getting more desperate, getting into trade union activities and pulling off more spectacular stunts because they're being pushed into desperate uh, corners, and those might launch off big initiatives. So we don't know where those sparks will be ignited, but we will be probably seeing larger resistance in this year.
All right. Well, that leads into sort of, unless there's anything further to say about the construction trades situation, that kind of leads into our next part. No, we'll probably wrap up after talking about this briefly. So, Yoon ran on this, but he's finally sort of, it seems like he's trying to kind of get some proposals set in stone to put forward around February, is what we're hearing. So it's going to be a whole set of so-called labor reforms. Always this very deceptive euphemism that they say. So they want to basically go backwards on a number of things that the Moon administration, previous administration, did. So there's the Serious Accident Punishment Act. We'll talk about that in a second. The 52-hour work week. Some might be surprised to learn that South Korea has a 52-hour work week. They want to push that up to, what was it, 67 or 60?
No, they're so the work week would be counting hours within a week. The Yoon administration is trying to let the counting happen like in a quarter. So effectively allowing crunch production to happen.
Okay. So
So
yeah,
peak seasons will see up to 80 hours a week.
Jesus. Yeah, I remember I worked in industrial stuff in peak season. It's grueling. 12-hour days for 30 days in a row. It's pretty insane. All right. Well, yeah, there's that. Because obviously the problem in South Korea, world's lowest birth rate, is that people simply aren't working enough. But anyway, uh, and uh, and as you know, Moon Jae-in, some of these things that happened in the previous administration, very limited, very minor, but it was still regarded as pro-labor. Um, so I guess the question now, as we mentioned, this whole narrative of so-called trade union corruption. They're proposing auditing all of the union's finances, and that's under the also, cynical euphemism of labor, quote unquote, reform. So, can we go into a little bit about the Serious Accident Punishment Act? I think everybody can understand the increase in the work week, but Serious Accident Punishment Act and any other kind of anti-labor neoliberal reforms that are in the pipeline.
Oh, okay. So I didn't prepare proper translations for it, but there is already a law legislation to punish employers for workplace accidents and disasters.
Hmm.
It's in the Public Health and Labor Act's proportions. But the thing is that it was always very limited. You had to be seen as holding direct responsibility, like malignance or actively ordering something dangerous to work on, and that only then would you be punished. The Serious Accident Punishment Act was introduced to punish CEOs, basically,
Hmm.
and it would be have a much wider range. So, um, and um, so, and the Yoon administration is saying that the Serious Accident Punishment Act prevents companies from managing their companies well. It's another restriction that has to be removed. But even during the Moon Jae-in administration, although it was passed uh, in a very sad manner. Like all of the really good portions of it was removed. It
Hmm.
doesn't apply to workplaces with less than 50 people, etc., etc. Um, but like I attended a rally regarding the Serious Accident Punishment Act because last week, no, this week actually on Thursday, it was the 1 year anniversary of the act being introduced, and only 2 days later, uh, three construction workers, were crushed under a waste pile, like the sand pile that was just very precariously piled upon.
Hmm.
It was, I think, something, um, and it collapsed upon the three workers, and
Yeah.
it took an entire week digging up to get to their bodies. Um, and the construction workers, although they're being attacked by the conservative newspapers as being a part of the labor aristocracy, being corrupt, being kind of like mobsters, 644 workers died last year, and amongst them, 53%, 341 of them were construction workers. So we're all seeing very precarious working conditions uh, uh, for construction workers. It's not like
Hmm.
the aristocracy die doing work.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and and the you will be seeing like articles series from Gyeongyang and Hangyeole on what the accidents were, digging into that, and they are being released this week and next week, coming days, etc. But the investigations uh, and the research into what what was the reasons behind all those accidents was that it was that the CEOs just did not were not caring enough to uh, follow up on safety rules. So if
Hmm.
they actually did care enough and saw that those rules were followed through, 300 people, 350 construction workers did not have to die last year. That was what the Serious Accident Punishment Act was supposed to prevent. But uh, even the accident that I just mentioned with these three workers under Sampyo Sanop, that Sampyo Industries, that they
Mhm.
died, they're still not being investigated. They're still not being, the prosecutors have not put a case against them. It's not being dealt in court. So what happens is that usually these things happen. They take a very long time to get into court, to get prosecuted, etc. And after that happens, people forget about it. But yeah, that's what the Serious Accident Punishment Act is.
Okay, well, cool. Thank you for that. Anything to add to that, Sangu? We have a question here, and then maybe we can wrap up after this last question.
Um, I don't think I have. We'll try.
All right, cool. We have a question from Corey Bisbee. Let me pop that up on the screen. All right, Corey asks, many U.S. labor leaders are criticized for seeing unions as mere special interests within the U.S. Democratic Party. Ironically, the center-left party here, Minju Dong Democratic Party, rather than independent working-class organizations. How do KCTU unions approach South Korean electoral politics? It's a very good question. Who wants to take that up for us?
So the KCTU was launched in the late 90s, and from then on it's called as the two wings of the progressive movement, the two objectives. One is autonomous trade unions, and then working class representation in the National Assembly. And for that, the Democratic Labor Party was launched in the early 2000s. I think it was 2004 or something. And that had the sole support, exclusive support of the KCTU, because the KCTU had worked to launch the Democratic Labor Party. But after that happened, there was a series of splits. And currently, as Sango mentioned earlier, there's four progressive parties right now. But and that has been the state for the past decade or so. This year, the because of that decade of being divided, the KCTU just said that vote for anyone you want amongst the progressive parties, but it was hard to enforce that rule. So a lot of membership drifted toward membership, but also cadre drifted towards supporting the Democratic Party. Uh, but this year, it seems like the political committee within the KCTU is trying to create a party of it for itself and bring in all the progressive parties into that and give out the uh, directives that all membership should vote for that single party. Whether that will work or not, we will see in April and afterwards, because that's when the directive will be uh, voted upon. Uh, but I'm worrying that it's a lot of party politics involve just trying to gain the upper hand amongst rival factions, etc. So we'll be seeing a lot of bickering, and I'm worried that this will suck in all issues. Now, I'm thinking that we will have to organize more direct actions and um strikes and organize from below, strengthen our ranks, etc. Focus on that, but I'm worried that the party politics might suck all that in. So hopefully we'll be seeing a unified progressive party initiative by the KCTU, but also that it does not it can wait and we can reap in the benefits of holding off a successful resistance against Yoon, and the results will stumble in next year in the general elections, but hopefully it won't be a hindrance to that effort.
All right, cool. Yeah, and he adds as a comment that's interesting. There was a similar effort to form a labor party in the U.S. in the late '90s, 2000s. Yeah, that's an interesting topic in and of itself, but outside the purview for this today. Well, I guess any final? We're about an hour and a half. Any final comments before we wrap up about perspectives going forward for the labor movement? Any just thoughts that maybe something that you wanted to say but forgot? Or so Bori or Sungu, any final things you wanted to say?
Can I add more about like Curry's question?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Like I saw a poll and like over 50% of KCTU members have voted for Lee Jae-myung, Democratic Party candidate. And another interesting part was that like if we only look at the irregular workers in KCTU, over 60% of workers voted for the progressive parties. And and other thing I would to say is like there was a presidential candidate in 2012 called Kim Sun-ja. I heard she was supported by the Socialist Party peoples, and what I was surprised because like during the presidential election she officially supported Lee Jae-myung, and because like the general union sometimes do like political discussion officially at the union, but like usually union members are not very interested. Also, like three out of two union officials in the Busan General Union is a member of the Labor Party, like but ordinary members are not very interested in like politics or like politics based on workers. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's all I want to say.
All right. Cool. That's good. Good stuff.
Yeah, my final comment would be that we saw 700 police being mobilized for a single desk raid. Contrast that to the 10,000 people that were expected to flock into Itaewon during Halloween.
Yeah.
The police mobilized for that were 137. Only 58 were in uniform. The rest were there in plain clothing to investigate possible drug abuse. So only 58
Yeah.
people were deployed to crowd control of 100,000 people. And and that was because the Ministry of Law and the prosecutors had declared a war against drugs during I think uh, uh, September, I think, and that's why a lot of the police force were deployed in that manner. Some of the police were in the area, but they were just taking off anti-UN flyers. Um, so it just shows what the priorities of the police
Mm-hmm.
are. Another contrast would be this is outside of the purview of this search warrant, but I attended a what's the word 전장현? 전장현 in English? Do you know what it is, Mike? The acronym for the disabilities movement, the biggest organization.
Oh yes, I should know this because we did an event with them.
Yeah, I
I'll check
attended
it
one of
out.
their rallies. That was they were restarting getting onto the subway at Samgakji Station. There were, I did an estimate about how many police were deployed there. So there were 6 to 7 police at each carriage, at each entrance to the
Mm.
subway, to the door to the subway, to each door. There are 4 doors for each carriage, and there are 10 carriages on line
Yeah, it's
4.
solidarity against disability discrimination. I believe that's
Right, right,
what
right.
it is. Yeah.
So that would, at a conservative estimate, be 280 police, and that's already excluding the police being on the sidelines because they were switching police in and out so that they weren't getting overworked, while us protesters were staying there the entirety of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 280 compared to 58. Again, 280, maybe like 350, more accurately, were there to prevent 40 disabled people in wheelchairs from getting onto the subway. So a
Yeah.
huge show on what the police's priorities are. It's more important to raid a single desk and put off this entire show for the NIS than to prevent people getting crushed to death or allowing people in wheelchairs to get on subway carriages.
Mm. No, that's an extremely important point, especially the Itaewon contrast. I mean, we've talked about this internally about possibly doing another a live stream about that, especially since it's past the kind of traditional mourning period, and there's going to be significant political activity around that and what led to that horrible tragedy. But yeah, good point. It illustrates the priorities. All right. Well, I guess if unless Songa, you have something to add, I'll just say thanks everybody for watching, and this video will stay up, so please share it with everyone, and we will have it on our audio podcast feed. We've traditionally been an audio only podcast, but we do want to do more of these live streams. They're fun for us and hopefully informative and enjoyable for you too. So we do have some kind of proper pre-recorded podcast episodes coming out, so stay tuned for that. Yeah, sorry for our dribble and drabble of content lately, but everybody's busy, engaged in activism and stuff like this that we're talking about. So we do want to get more content out there. But thanks everybody for joining and sharing this, and especially those who asked questions. All the questions are really good and enrich the discussion. So I guess we shall see you soon, comrades.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for joining.
Yep. See you guys.